What are some of the more interesting projects that you see right now, or maybe just projects that align with and help further advance your political ideals?
So I think what's important to keep in mind is that a lot of the tools that are being created in crypto world are not necessarily being created with for a particular cause or for particular political message necessarily, besides the continued existence of crypto and blockchain stuff. So I think there are a lot of tools out there and projects that I think are interesting from a conceptual level, or that there is something interesting about it, and there is something to say about it that can be useful in many different contexts, and including a left-wing one, including one where you're with a bunch of your socialist friends or anarchist friends or whatever, and you want to do something on blockchain. There are a lot of projects like that. There are a lot of projects that are interesting in reimagining how we relate to one another. But there aren't so many projects that are we're a left-wing project. And there are probably various reasons for why that is, because maybe, especially DeFi stuff, if you're in financial, you don't want to make political statements so much, because you want to appear as apolitical and get as much money as possible, so you don't want to offend anyone. But I'm a little bit biased, but the project that I'm working on is sort of one of the few that I know that is sort of an explicitly leftist kind of project. It's called Breadchain. So with Breadchain, what we're trying to do is kind of provide an infrastructure or foundation for any type of project that is kind of aligning with our values. So you can say progressive, leftist, whatever type of values, and to have a place for them to kind of plug into, to be a part of a federation of also aligned projects. And in that way, we can sort of create different network effects of these different projects who can then sort of cooperate with one another in various ways, to expand the overall base of, let's say, progressive leaning people in the blockchain world and their ability to use these tools. So there's that project I think is, of course, really interesting, but I'm very biased. And there are already three other projects that are within the umbrella of Breadchain. So one is Pact DAO, so that's a mutual aid organization in New York City. The other one is Labor DAO. They're sort of exploring the intersection of labor unions and crypto, and trying to figure out both from a traditional union side, how can traditional unions use them, but also what is the current state of labor in the Web3 world, because there's a lot of people working in DAOs who I think are being misled about the type of working conditions that maybe they were going to be put into, that they end up realizing that they maybe are being exploited in one way or another. And then there is the Crypto Commons Association, which is a kind of an existing space in Austria where they host a lot of different type of crypto events. So one of the first ones they did was called the Crypto Commons Gathering. So that was a really interesting one where they gathered a bunch of people in sort of thinking about crypto from a commons perspective, which is a kind of particular political theory, commoning, which is really interesting. They also do stuff. They do a conference on regenerative finance and things like that. So these three projects are kind of right now the federation, along with kind of Breadchain itself, where we've been building our own application called the Breadchain crowd staking application, where people can sort of passively fund the cooperative, the project itself, by just giving DAI on Polygon. So we have the application is basically a smart contract where you give DAI to the contract forwards the DAI to Aave. The interest that's accumulated from your DAI goes to the cooperative, and then you as a user, you receive back in collateral 1-to-1 bread token. So you can spend and use your bread token like any ERC20 token, or you can burn it and receive back the DAI that you gave. So in that way, it's kind of like a local currency. If you're in the UK, like maybe like the Brixton pound is I know one that local currency that's like pretty popular. So it's meant to be kind of like a local currency for this, kind of network of progressive leaning projects as a way to kind of like passively fund and as well be able to exist within capitalism. So like one of the, the biggest contradiction that we have as people on the left is that we need to exist within the system that we disagree with, but we also need to be against the system, right? And that's a tough position to be in. And so part of this application is kind of like trying to deal with that contradiction. How do we exist within and against? So that's one project. I know there are other ones that people are working on. Like I know DAO is a really interesting one. I think that is on Juno Network, which is like the Cosmos ecosystem. And they are kind of building DAO tools, but DAOs specifically sort of modeled after worker cooperatives. So they're very explicit about that, which I think is really interesting. And there's probably a bunch more that I'm forgetting at the moment, but there's a few projects that I would say are, I would say progressive leaning, although, explicitly political, maybe not, but I still find them interesting.
Okay, yeah, that was a great answer. And yeah, I think I smiled a little bit when you mentioned your project, because I remember when Vitalik asked you the same thing. He's like, "What's your favorite project?" And you're like, "My project,"
Yeah, I mean, cool. I'm shilling the socialist project. Unfortunately, I feel awkward about it, but yeah, it is what I'm doing. It is, so I am biased. I say that openly, but I think it's an interesting project, which is why I'm working on it.